Hello everybody, it's white to play in this position. Black just went knight g4, okay? That's their last move. I want you to find the best move for white here. Folks, I will talk about typical calculation mistakes in today's episode. I witnessed these kind of errors several times as a chess coach, and since the fundamental function of this channel is to help you improve your game, I have to give you these sort of mistakes, and I want honesty from you today. You will be as honest as possible. You will stop the videos at the right moments and think through the positions yourself, and you will see whether you're also prone to such mistakes and errors as I will mention in today's episode, folks, right? That's the way to improve. We have to be honest in accepting our mistakes and take steps to fix those problems. Let's start with this position, folks. White has an extra pawn, black just went knight g4. Do you remember the most important question in chess? Yes, it's what would my opponent do if I don't make a move right now, right? Whenever you see a move by the opponent, you have to identify the threat you are facing. That's always number one question. And I hope you saw the threat, guys, right? Say queen takes h2 and that's checkmate on the board. So you're facing a serious threat. The question is, what should white do? How do you react against this threat? Okay, so in the actual game, my student hand waved and he played knight f3. Hand waving was this. He refused to play g3, which is the best move, by the way. Congratulations if you found the move g3. My student refused to play this move purely out of general principles, right? He said, but I don't want to play this move because my king gets weakened if I play g3, right? This was totally what Stan Heisman calls hand waving, which is you're relying on general principles instead of concrete calculation, right? The first mistake is you don't actually calculate at all in a position that required concrete calculation. So this is a move that is basically the only move here to survive for white, but he didn't make this move out of general principles without pure calculation. And then, of course, right, since g3 wasn't playable in his mind, he had to play the only other move. And he played this move without much thinking. I will come back to this kind of error. That's called Kotov syndrome, guys, right? So he played this move without much calculation because in his mind, this was not playable. Hand waving in its purest form, and white got destroyed because, yeah, white is totally lost here because black can take twice. Yeah, you see the fork. You see the logos like royal fork here, and white is losing material. Queen takes e4, and the game is over basically, right? So after g3, going back after g3, white is still better in this position because let's say takes. Yes, you won a pawn, but then, well, comes d6. Look at my bishop. Look at my rook. Well, by taking on e3, you activate my rook on f1 as well, and things are turning basically. White has a big advantage already here, and then you can take on f7, and the game just goes on basically, right? Let's make a space repetition, guys. I've shown you this position before. That's a perfect example of hand waving. c5 is on the board. The question is, should white exchange those rooks and enter a pawn endgame or not? Right? So the choice is this. Should we take on d5 or should we take on g4? And a hand waving mistake would be to take on g4 by purely relying on general chess principles. You might tell yourself, hey, look at those weak pawns, and look at my pawns, I created one more pass pawn here, it must be good for me, right? So again, without concrete calculation, you're relying on general principles and you make a move without any concrete calculation. That's perfect hand waving. In fact, black is winning this pawn endgame because of the split pawns, right? Look at those pawns, they are split, they are far away from each other, and the white king cannot deal with them all, right? For example, then you go d3, you cannot take the pawn because the pawn is running. You see the problems, right? You see the problems we are facing right now. Then comes the other pawn, and you see where it's going, basically. Black just wins in this position. So what's the story? Pawn endgames are one of the most concrete phases of chess. So when we are transitioning into a pawn endgame, we should never hand wave. We should always rely on concrete calculation. And yeah, rook takes g4, and basically just the game is over. There's no turning back, right? Like the single black king is stopping all your pawns, basically. Despite the appearance, despite it looks like a beautiful endgame for white, it's black who is winning. And that's lies the paradox of some pawn endgames, folks. Let's move from hand waving to wishful thinking. I made a couple of videos about this. Wishful thinking. We humans, we have confirmation biases, right? We are seeking for evidence from the world that confirm our beliefs, okay? Instead of seeking for counter evidence, right? We humans don't want that. We don't want surprises. We want everything to sort of confirm with our existing beliefs about the world. But that also creates biases and mistakes on a chessboard, right? You have to be a scientist when you're playing chess. You have to actively search for the best reply by the opponent at all times. In this position, you have a choice. Do you go rook f3 or do you drop back the king, let's say to h2, right? I want you to stop the video and please think for yourself first. What would be your choice here, folks? Now going back, in the actual game, my student, he played rook f3 against me because he was wishing and hoping that I will take on f3, and he correctly evaluated this position as a draw because, well, the kings are sort of in an opposition, right? So now I have to go back with my king, and white has no problems. What is the mistake? The mistake is after rook f3, he's not looking for the best response for the opponent, right? Wishful thinking is only hopes and wishes that I will take. We're not playing checkers, we are playing chess, right? So then of course I played king e4 in the game, and suddenly white has to exchange off those rooks on e3. As you can see, that's a very forcing move, and the resulting endgame is not a draw, it's a clear win for black, right? Because look at the black king. Shouldering away the white king, white is in a zugzwang, you have to lose the pawn, then you have to lose the second pawn. You see where it's going, right? The game is basically over. Again, pawn endgames are very concrete and sharp, that requires calculation, and you should never engage in such wishful thinking, folks. Again, it's more difficult to search for the best responses for the opponent because we are humans, right? But chess requires you to have this mindset at all times. That's a process we are talking about, right? You have to internalize this process. Yes, you're actually playing chess always for both sides. You're seeking to find the best moves for white and black at all times. That's how strong players play chess. But weaker players, amateurs, when they're just beginning the game, right? Obviously, it's a very complex game, right? They have hard times in anticipating the best responses for the opponent, as in this case, folks. Another example of wishful thinking, and now we are moving from wishful thinking to looking at irrelevant lines, okay? I'm playing chess, I'm playing checkers and not chess. In this position, white just took on h5, okay? The queen took on h5, and they are hitting our knight on g4. I want you to stop the video right now, and please find a good move for black. Please engage in the right calculation process and see where it leads you, okay? Okay, folks? So, first things first, what are you seeing in this position? The orientation phase, right? So for the moment, we are down a pawn. But do you also recognize that this queen on h5 is offside, is in Siberia? She could be trapped. For example, when you look at a piece, you should identify whether that could be trappable potentially, right? So I'm smelling something. This queen might be trapped in this position. And can you see that beautiful way to trap the queen, to start the trapping process, folks? Yes, you're a great player if you found the move f5, because now, well, I'm defending my knight, but more importantly, right, the queen is running short of squares, basically. Where is the queen going? And my next move is, of course, rook h6, and I will trap your queen. That's why this position is in my course, Fundamental Chess Calculation Skills on Chessable, because that's a beautiful 3-ply calculation. I make a move f5, and you're helpless against my threat rook h6, right? You can see it. The queen has basically nowhere to escape. This also shows us that we should generate several candidate moves on the very first move instead of going deep in one line. Because in the actual game, my student played knight h2. That's a beautiful example of first wishful thinking, because he's only wishing and hoping that the queen or the king will take on h2, and then obviously, right, I will play rook h6 and I will win your queen. At first sight, it looks like a very nice move, don't you think? He goes knight h2. In his mind, he's playing checkers because in his mind, that's forced, right? Queen h2, rook h6, and the queen is trapped. Or king h2, rook h6, and black wins. It all looks beautiful so far. So what's wrong with this move? Well, that's not a forcing move. You're giving white so many choices. First of all, you're also giving this queen a chance, right, to go back and escape. But even after rook e1, for example, I just defend my rook. Well, the queen can escape, right? The queen basically is no longer trapped. I don't need to take your knight on h2. That was a very irrelevant line that I looked at after queen f5. Basically, white has no problems. White is actually slightly better in this position. The queen survived. What is the knight doing on h2? The knight on the rim is dim, right? But you see the fundamental problem in the thought process. That's a totally thought process mistake, folks. He spent so much time in this move, right? Talking about time management. In his mind, that's a good move because white has to react. White has to capture the knight. He's missing the basic point of this position as well. The basic point meaning that the queen was running short of squares, right? And that's why that was the first step, important step for you to even generate the move f5. So the bottom line of this position, folks, is that this is a move that masters discard instantly. By the way, that's also one problem with beginners because they look at irrelevant lines, they calculate, right? Because, right, there's no constraint. Masters, they have constraints in their minds. They immediately discard so many moves that look promising for a beginner, right? That's why masters are great in finding good moves correctly, but also, you know, in blitz, in bullet, they can play greatly because they discard certain things instantly. Master doesn't even look at this move probably. It's not even in his vision, right? Just looks ridiculous for a master. But, right, a beginner can spend their entire time on a move like this, folks. Another instructive position that caught my eye when white was looking at irrelevant lines. This position, white has an extra pawn, but if you look at, well, the king side, they are still sleeping, right? We have some problems when it comes to development and time. And now the queen is attacked by the bishop. So I want you to, again, stop the video and tell me how you would play in this position with the white pieces, folks. First things first, folks, we want to develop our pieces ASAP, right? In this position, that's our goal. Again, it's about goal setting. The crucial aspect of calculation. I made a video about this. I will post a link here. A crucial aspect of chess calculation that's neglected. In the first minute, when you look at a position, you should just orient yourself. Just let the world speak to you. Just verbalize what's going on. What are the basic imbalances, right? What's the basic difference between positions? Because all these things will give you great ideas for candidate moves. Yeah, it will be desirable for white to play this move. Why? Because I want to castle short ASAP, right? I don't want to lose more time with my queen in this position. But it looks like bishop c4 is unplayable because you're allowing moves like knight a5. Can you see it, folks? I want you to visualize right now. Bishop c4, knight a5. At first sight, it looks like white is losing material. But I want you to go one ply deeper, and can you see a way out for white? Can you play bishop c4 anyways, even though it looks unplayable at first sight? Congratulations, folks, if you actually played bishop c4 and then you saw this move, bishop e6 check, and you're saving your bishop, right? Again, that's in my course, 3-ply calculation, accurate calculation, but that's totally about you setting your goal properly, right? Yeah, that's a move that you want to make in this position, and that's actually working for you, right? So this also shows us that, you know, we should slowly increase our depth of calculation. Accurately calculating 3-ply lines will make you a much better calculator, right? But the processes, it's all about the processes. I'm setting my goal properly. I'm looking at the opponent's forcing moves, right? I'm looking at the opponent's forcing moves. That's very important. And then I try to go one ply deeper and make my ideas work, make my good-looking ideas work using tactics. In this position, of course, white is slightly better because black has to recapture, then queen a4, and then I will slowly play knight e2, castle short, and everything looks good. Black cannot punish my king in the center. Well, in the actual game, right, many people in this position told me the move knight e4, right? Many people actually want to make this move work. And there lies a mistake, folks. First of all, tell me what knight e4 looks like. Let's, break down this move knight e4. Yes, it looks like you're hitting my queen, counterattack, I understand that. But do we even need to calculate the ramifications of knight e4? I think that's a totally irrelevant line, and I will explain to you why. First of all, knight e4 is a very illogical move to make here for white. Why? Because your pieces are sleeping, and you're playing with the only developed piece. Right? So it's just totally against chess principles, basically, to play knight e4. And that's why masters, they discard this move instantly without even looking like one ply deeper, okay? But amateurs can look. It might look like a good move for amateur, right? Then the problem is this. You're giving 10 billion options to black, right? Like black can do whatever in this position. Like you can spend the entire 15 minutes on this line, for example. And then you can spend minutes like this, queen e5, queen f5. Black can do whatever in this position, right? In fact, black is completely crashing you after moves like queen f5 in this position, and everything is hanging. How can you defend your position? Bishop b4 checks are coming, knight b4s are coming. Look at your king, right? The game is basically over after knight e4. But I've seen many players just, calculating 15 minutes in lines like this, where a master discards them instantly, right? So again, it's about unprincipled play, not giving too many options for your opponent, because that's also what you're doing, right? By going knight e4, you're giving 10 different options to black, and that's also maybe a signal for you to take a step back and ask yourself, are there better solutions, more maybe forcing solutions? What is my goal in this position? Yeah, that's also, verbalization. You're talking to yourself. You tell yourself what the goal should be. The goal should be to castle short ASAP. And this is guiding, right, your candidate move search. There lies tremendous beauty and potential for growth, folks. That's a beautiful part of chess. And if you get better at this in the goal setting process, then you'll also stop looking at lines like this and wasting your precious time. It's black to play in this position, folks. And I'm introducing you the next chess mistake of calculation. That's Kotov syndrome. That's a funny name. It's been mentioned first by Alexander Kotov, a grandmaster from Soviet Union. He wrote a book that is titled Think Like a Grandmaster. In that book, Kotov mentions one type of mistakes he was making all the time. He says he was looking at some blinds, analyzing some blinds in depth, okay, and then he can't find a clear solution. And then he was choosing one final move and he was playing it without calculation, right? Almost like elimination, right? He was wasting all of his time, let's say, in one or two candidates. None of them look good. And then he just picks a third candidate and plays it without much analysis. And then he was losing games because that final candidate was a blunder that he didn't properly spend time on. That's why we should always spend time on the move we will actually make. And then comes this position, folks. I'm sure many of you spent the entire time maybe on the move bishop takes g5, right? Obviously, because it looks like we are winning a piece. And what's going on in that line? Obviously, white will go queen h5 check and then regain the bishop. And the line is complex and long. In fact, I will show you how it looks like. Bishop takes g5, queen h5 check. It, in the end, leads to a position that is not so great for black, right? Because white is the bishop pair and a better pawn structure, basically. Yeah? So you can spend your entire time when you're calculating on a move like bishop takes g5. And imagine that you saw all this. Imagine that you actually visualized and you understood that it's actually white who is better in that moment. And then you can basically tell yourself, hey, then I will play the next good looking move, knight takes e5, right? Because here you have like two choices. I can take the knight, but also I can take this pawn. So you can just tell yourself, okay, since bishop takes g5 doesn't work, then I will just go ahead and play the move knight takes e5. And now comes my question, guys. Can you please blunder check knight takes e5? Does it work for black? Or can that be a blunder, right? Please find the potential defects behind the move knight takes e5. And how do you do that? You have to look at the forcing replies by the opponent against knight takes e5. Now we are talking about the blunder check, which you must always do at the end of your calculations. Folks, knight takes e5 doesn't work. It actually happened in the actual game. And you tell me, what's the next move? Bam! Knight e6, and the queen is trapped because the d7 pawn is pinned. Oh my god, it will be a shame to lose a game like this, folks, right? I think that's a beautiful game because that's a grandmaster game. The grandmaster lost the game by capturing on e5, so he's a very strong player that probably fell for his fallacy of Kotov syndrome. He probably spent a long time on this move, bishop takes g5, he didn't like it, and then he just went ahead and took on e5 without much thinking. That's a beautiful mistake because we can learn tremendously from this. Again, lesson number one, you should always spend time on the move you will actually make. Imagine that you then decide to play knight takes e5. Well, you have to go through the whole process. What are my opponent's forcing moves against knight takes e5? That's also difficult because until here, right, the pawn was not pinned because the knight was blocking the bishop. But the moment you take on e5, the d7 pawn suddenly becomes pinned. That's a drawback principle in chess. Every move has a drawback and you have to identify the drawback of knight takes e5 actively by actively searching for the potential defects of your own move and the best move by the opponent against your move. That's how chess resembles science. We are undergoing a falsification process right now. We are searching actively for the best move for the opponent, and that's how we become a better player. Well, by the way, guys, going back to this position, I have to tell you the other side of the same coin, sunk cost fallacy, right? Sunk cost fallacy is the reverse mistake of Kotov syndrome. What does it mean, sunk cost fallacy? I made a video about this. It basically means you continue to invest resources and time on the failed projects. Imagine that you spend 15 minutes on a move, a candidate, you're searching, it doesn't work, but since you already spent 15 minutes, you don't want to give it up and play a different move. You want to play that move anyways, even though it's not working. That's a sunk cost fallacy. That's a cognitive bias that basically is all around the world. Yeah, politics, marriage, life, everywhere. It's a human cognitive bias, of course. So you see, Kotov syndrome, you spend a long time in one move, then you give it up and play the next move without much thinking. Sunk cost fallacy is the reverse. You spend a long time, let's say, on a move like this, bishop takes g5. Imagine you spent your entire time on this move. And then, well, even though you don't see anything, white will have this beautiful endgame. Well, since you wasted all these resources, you don't want to admit a mistake, right? Because that's about admitting a mistake. You don't want to admit mistake. You say, you justify this move to yourself. I will probably find something, or it cannot be that bad for me, right? Like all these justifications. And you go ahead and play the move anyways. Let's finish with this homework position, folks, that came in a game of mine, in a classical game. It's white to play. And just take a step back and look what's going on. It's equal material right now, but white has these amazing looking pawns, pass pawns, but one of them is under fire. So the question is this: should white go d7 or e7 in this position? That's a perfect calculation training for you. I want you to analyze both of these options, and please write to me how would you play and what you are seeing, and also please try to avoid the mistakes that I mentioned in this video. And finally, just make sure that you blunder check your moves properly, which means you have to look at the opponent's forcing moves at the end, and you should not stop your calculations until the position became quiet, because that's a final thing that I'm sure many of you know, right? It's called quiescence error, actually. If you commit a quiescence error, it means you're stopping your calculations in a non-quiet position. There are still forcing moves left, but you stop and then you blunder. Just like in the last example, where black took on e5 and allowed knight e6 and the queen was trapped. Remember, knight e6 was a forcing move. Black didn't check for that. So obviously that's a crucial part of chess mistakes as well, calculation mistakes. Okay, folks? So again, the question is, should we go d7 and e7? And hopefully you will avoid my mistake that costed this game to me. That's a very painful game that I lost, guys. Okay? So what did we see today? Again, I'm doing all these videos, folks, to help you improve your game. So if you notice similar issues in your games, if you notice that you're also failing similarly to today's mistakes, then that's a good sign, because you're aware of your issues. Awareness is the first step for the cure, as you know, right? So the doctor is diagnosing some of those issues, and then, right, you can take actionable advice. At least write it down somewhere, guys. Write those issues down somewhere so you become aware of these issues. Maybe over time, in 5 months, 6 months, those mistakes might reduce, right? You can just tell yourself in actual game, you can remind yourself. Maybe you can even have small checklists at the beginning, right? To when you're playing slow games, you can have some checklist or those questions, right? Then it comes to a calculation moment, for example, you can just remind yourself about those points. Am I failing in one of these issues that Dr. John told us, or what is going on? Also, when you're analyzing your games, for example, please, because that's also one function, right? That you're putting names, you're giving names to those mistakes to make it more concrete, right? Kotov syndrome, that looks like a beautiful name, right? Then it sticks in your mind, basically. So then you can also identify those issues maybe easier in your games. And obviously, I will make separate videos about evaluation mistakes when it comes to calculation, visualization mistakes, right? All these things, but also other videos about time management. But today I just want to give you, right, those top process errors that are recurrent errors that I've witnessed several times as a coach. If you like this video, please give me a like and subscribe. That's very important for me to be able to continue making such videos to help improve your game. Please share the channel with your friends. I keep having comments that this is the most underrated chess channel in the world. So please keep sharing and telling your chess friends. I will be very happy about this. And I will catch you on the next episode on similar calculation issues to help improve your game, folks. Bye-bye.